this afternoon, this evening, this morning, wherever you're watching from. I'm joined today by my colleague Kat Covell.
Hey, Will Murphy.
Sorry for our postponement from last week. Little changes, last-minute change of schedule, as is normal in show business. But we're here today to talk about a very interesting topic: audio input on grandMA2 software, which can be achieved through the 3-pin XLR port audio input on the back of your grandMA2 full-size light, ultralight, or RPU. If you are using on PC, which I'll be using today for this webinar, you can use the microphone input on your computer. So if the computer that you use with on PC actually has a normal microphone, which you use to do, your webinars or your Skype meetings or whatever, that microphone, which would be the default recording device, will map itself to the on PC software. So I guess if you had on PC in a club, you could just use the microphone to kind of listen to the ambient sound. Or if you have that microphone input jack on your computer, and that input jack is considered the default recording device, it will map itself to the on PC software. So what I'm doing today is I'm going to show you some of the settings that exist in terms of how you can take that audio input and map it to cue lists and effects in the software. There is no enable or disable setting for sound input. There's just the sound input fader. Okay, so let's get started here. Turn my camera off. Sorry, you're not going to look at me today. We're doing fancy audio stuff to make this work, so you're just going to see my screen. So I have decided to showcase this by using a free software that is a drum machine, because listening to having a drum tracks feeding into your desk are what can be best used to kind of trigger things on the desk. So you have this window here, and I've drawn it on the little screen, but just to showcase it on a big screen, it's a window that you draw. So you would tap an empty space on your screen, go to System, and go to Sound Input. Okay, what that's going to do is it's going to show you a breakdown of the frequency settings that are available. If you look here, I have a kick drum coming in and a cowbell. And if I put the fade to 0, it's going to react very quickly. If I put the fade really up, these frequencies are going to react really slowly. Now the fade function is going to be used for effects, so I'll show you that. Now if I mute this kick drum, you'll see sound 4 is actually reacting to the cowbell, which is about 460 hertz. So the various frequencies that exist, you have a choice of all sound, bass, medium, and high, and then you have what's considered sound 1 through 7, which is the various frequency breakdowns, starting at 57 hertz all the way up to 3.7 kilohertz, and various frequencies in between. So when I start that kick drum again, the reason you see sound all, sound bass, and basically sound 1 and 2, which are the low frequencies, they all kind of match up because it's effectively all related to the kick drum, which is a low frequency. Now, what kind of stuff you could do with this? Well, BPM, if you guys are familiar with Speedmasters, we actually have a webinar about that, I think. Right, Kat? Didn't we do like a special masters? See, if you want to review what Speedmasters, Rate Masters are, Group Masters, they're all in this Tech Talks number 4 on the playlist called Special Masters. So if you're used to maybe using speed 1 through 7 or 12 or Rate Masters, etc. Well, the actual Speedmaster 16 is the BPM Speedmaster. The BPM Speedmaster is automatically calculated based on the incoming beat of the sound that's being fed into the desk. So, interestingly, my kick drum machine is running at 120 BPM, and what has occurred is this BPM fader, I've adjusted it so it's actually doing 2 times the beat. If I bring this down so that it's calculating at 1 times the beat, you'll notice that the actual speed of my drum machine matches up with what the BPM counter is calculating. So I'm going to adjust this so it's running at 90 BPMs, which is going to slow down. And you see the on-PC BPM fader automatically recalculates to this new beat. If I go up, maybe I'll type in 140. And this little graph here is showing you the breakdown of the beat. None of this stuff is adjustable. It's just reactive windows that show you what's going on. It's calculating at the beat that's coming in. Now this is a very clear beat. You know, it's just a kick drum. If you actually play music into your on-PC, obviously there's a lot more sound going on. I can't promise it's going to be a perfect calculation of BPM, but you get the idea. So if BPM is actually coming in at 120 BPM and that's too fast for you, like I did earlier, you can just kind of adjust this until it becomes, you know, the actual calculated beat times a half, or the actual calculated beat times 2. So dragging this fader around allows you to adjust that. And if these 100mm faders or any of your executors, you can assign a special master, which we of course cover in that webinar I just pointed out. When you adjust this, it's adjusting it in the sound window as well. So don't think that you have to have this sound window opened in order to make these adjustments. You can do it with a real fader as well. Now, what are a couple things I might do with that incoming beat? Well, you can hear that kick drum, right? You see this stuff bouncing up and down in your sound input window. If you map it to an effect, the sound of the actual the level of the sound, the volume of the sound gets mapped to the intensity in this case, because I built an effect that's mapped to dimmer. And how quickly it reacts depends on this sound fader. So you see, if I put the sound fade at 100, the beat comes in, the intensity rises, and then it slowly decays. The sound fade is essentially, in audio speak, it's the attack and decay of the incoming sound. So how do I do this? There's an effect object here. I would edit that, and one second. Forgive me a second, I forgot to turn off my notifications. I want to make sure we don't get notifications in the middle of our webinar here. Back to this, the effect editor. What I've done is I've taken the attribute dim and the form instead of a sine wave or a cosine. By the way, if you want to learn about effects, there is an effects webinar. In this effects webinar, we didn't cover the sound form. So here, we're covering the sound form, which is this one. I choose sound, and then I get to choose one of those frequencies. So based on looking at the reaction in my sound window, do I want the effect to listen to the all frequency, or just the bass frequencies, or the mids, or the highs, or a very specific frequency based on sound 1 through 7? In this case, I wanted it to be all, so I chose all. So basically, whatever sound comes in, the loudness of that sound is directly going to map itself to the dimmer for the fixtures that are associated with that effect. And then the low value is when there's no sound, and the high value is when the sound is the loudest. Of course, this can be outside of the range of the fixture if you want. It just means, see, it changes the look because the fixture is at full for more time because it reaches 100, and then the effect is going higher based on the sound, but the lights are already at their physical high point. If you don't want the lights to turn all the way off when there's no sound, maybe your low is 20. Now, because this is based on an effect, you don't have to limit this to just dimmer. This could be any attribute. So for example, I kind of had this idea, maybe I'd try to do it with tilt. We do sound, we'll say all again, and the low value is 50, and I want them to tilt 20 degrees based on the sound that's coming in. If I draw a let's get rid of the fixture sheet, draw a little stage view here. Now what's happening is it's tilting and the dimmer's coming up at the same time. If things are moving too quickly, remember you have a global sound fade function. There's no real dampening available per effect, like attack and decay are disabled. So not a ton of control. If you really want to get granular, you'd have to do kind of some tweaking with the audio input that's coming. So remember, not super granular tools. These are just kind of rough sound tools that can really kind of change the look of your show and help with some kind of dynamic programming. Now that's from the effect standpoint. The other thing that we could do is we have cue lists. Okay, I actually already built 2 of them here, and you notice each cue is getting triggered based on the sound of that actual kick. If I make these cue lists so you guys can see them at the bottom of the window, if I mute that kick drum, you'll notice that this cue list is no longer running. But that cowbell that you hear, notice how this cue list on the right, every hit of that cowbell is triggering that cue. Well, if I add a few more cowbells in there, you'll notice how the cue list is running faster. The fade actually is going to dictate a little bit of how quickly the cue list, sorry, not the fade, the BPM calculation is actually going to correlate with how quickly these cues are triggering. I know that sounds a little confusing, but that's actually how it works. This BPM fader is directly correlated with the sound trigger in the cue list, and whether it triggers on every hit of the sound or maybe every other hit of the sound. Now, I don't have a real consistency here in my cowbell, so now with a consistent cowbell, you see how it's triggering every cue. If I bring this BPM fader to 0, notice how this cue list is not triggering anymore. If I bring it up to about half, you'll notice the cues are going to trigger every kind of other cowbell. If I bring it up to 1, it's still going about every other cowbell, but if I bring this all the way up to 2 times, it's going to trigger at every cowbell. So that little correlation is not very intuitive. It's not very obvious, but in this case, if you want your cowbell to trigger the cue list every time, you would increase your BPM fader. Now, how do I see this working? If you guys are paying attention here, the yellow lines are going to be every hit of the cowbell. That's the beat, but the purple lines would be the actual trigger point. So if I go up to 1, you're going to see the lines happen a lot more often, and then you go up to 2, you see a lot more purple lines. So the purple lines are going to help you understand when the triggering is actually happening. To mute that cowbell, we'll go back to the kick drum. You'll see this cue list going. So how did I differentiate the 2 cue lists? That's with the trig column. Sound 1, remember from this window I can see is a frequency of 57 Hertz. Sound 4, I can see is a frequency of about 460 Hertz, which is closer to what that cowbell is doing. So now when both the cowbell and the kick are running, both cue lists are running simultaneously. There's some snares in here. You can see the snare appears to be most associated with sound 3. So that's where maybe this particular cue is. Sound 4 is pretty close already, but if I choose sound 3, I'm going to get triggering that's more in line with that snare. And the last sound option that you might want to use in a cue list is that you can actually map the cue list directly to that BPM Speedmaster. And what happens is the cue list is just running at a strict BPM, but it's referencing this Speedmaster. So if I bring this down to half, maybe what's happening is your incoming audio input. Oh, there's some hand clapping. Yay. I don't know if you guys ever played around drum machines, but they're kind of fun to play with. So now the calculated BPM is going to map directly to basically how quickly this cue list is running, and then your trig time here is a multiplier. So even if your BPM fader is at 0.5, if your multiplier in your cue list is a 2, whatever you see here, 120, means that your cues are going to trigger at twice that time because there's an internal multiplier. So a lot of mathematics options here, and 0 means nothing. So we'll go back to 1. So that's essentially how the sound input works. By the way, I keep dragging this fader to kind of multiply it by 1 or 2, etc. It's a lot faster if you use these double speed and half speed buttons. So double speed would bring it to 1, double speed would bring it to 2. So if you're trying to adjust the attack and decay of if you're trying to adjust the trigger points for the cue, it's a little faster with this. And I mentioned sound input. If you bring that to 0, you get no sound. Maybe the audio guy is sending you a really loud signal, so you want to bring it down. And this is also, sound input is a fader that you can actually map as a special master. Sound input, to bring it down, nothing reacts, bring it up, now things are reacting. So on the fly, if you have effects set up to listen to sound, on the fly you could just bring this fader up and down to kind of control how it's reacting. How's that sound, Kat? Does that feel like I covered everything?
Everything and more.
All right. I think we just jumped to questions. Now I think there was a pre-question that seemed worth answering.
They're all worth answering. We wanna get that knowledge out there. Hey Will, how can I make the sound input affect the intensity of a light as if it were a VU meter?
Yeah, so this actually is a common question. Based on the effect that I built earlier, I think you noticed that it's all fixtures. So there's no way to actually spread that beat across fixtures where the level correlates with a specific fixture at a specific time. But since we implemented bitmap fixtures, you can actually do this, because what you'll do is you'll lay your bitmap over a group of fixtures, and you'll use the sound input to manipulate the Y position of that actual bitmap. So as that bitmap image moves over those fixtures, it would light them up, and then when there's no sound, that bitmap is not over those fixtures, it would go away. So building this actually, for example, if I have a grid of fixtures like this 5 by 5, one bitmap is not going to correlate with each set of frequencies, because you might want the bass and then the high notes and then the middles. So I can put one bitmap over it just to get the general idea. Maybe I have a picture of an actual bitmap, and then it runs up and down. Now we have a bitmap tutorial. So the concept of how you patch these, how you set these up, how you set up bitmaps, I think you should check them out here. But to help with the question of how you actually set it up, we thought we'd save it for this actual webinar. I'll just show the first idea here. I'm going to save this view. There we go. And I want to bring a layout view in here. silence this beat for a second. So 6.0 fixture 501, I think was my bitmap, right? So I need to draw a box around these fixtures, make them visualized based on the bitmap that's chosen. So cool, and then fixture 501 is my bitmap. Bring that to full. The image pool, right? Import an image. These are actual pictures. So we're going to go to Bitmap and use just try and find a suitable image here. There we go. Use a square. So we'll choose that image for the bitmap, and then layout number 2, and you can see the image is in the middle. Need to scale it up a little bit so it covers all the fixtures. And now what's going to occur on the position is easier to see if I put a layout view down here. So the position on the Y, I scaled it up a little too much. Maybe 60. So this might be the resting point for the bitmap, and essentially from a sound input standpoint, I'd probably build this as an effect. We'll just find an empty effect object in here. So bitmap fixture, under video, we want position Y. And we already found that the resting point, or the low value, should actually be -100, and all the way at full maybe is 0, or better is actually -30, -20. So we'll put our low value as -100 and put high value. We're doing this as an absolute, the sound form all. And what I'm going to do is off that, and there we go. So I'm running that effect, and you see how it popped that bitmap down. Now what we'll do is we'll turn our Windows 7. And we'll turn that kick drum back on. And you see how the bitmap is basically moving up and down across the fixtures based on the Y. If I missed any steps in there, just type us the question. Cat's watching the questions. Does anybody point anything out that's confusing? No? Good? Okay. So, now, this is one image that's spread across all these fixtures. What you're going to have to actually do related to bitmap effects, which you'll learn by watching this bitmap tutorial, is you're basically going to have to create a separate bitmap for each frequency, a separate effect for each frequency, and then a separate layout view for each set of fixtures. This can be sped up a little bit if I go to setup, or what we're going to do is the size, not on the Y, we want to do this. So maybe it's those two. I'll put my base. Now what we have to do is we have to make a copy of that bit of that layout view. and then we'll copy that layout view there. So when I go to the second layout view, we'll go to setup, and we're going to actually move that. Oh, there we go. Move that there. So it's over the second. I keep choosing Y. And then we go to the third layout view. Choose that box. Move that over those fixtures. This would be the base. I need to make a copy of that effect and a copy of that effect. And then if I looked at my patch, I have different bitmap effects. So from a programmer standpoint, we'll say fixture 502 at fixture 501. So now 502 is doing the same thing. It would be this layout view. And I just need to jump into, tell this to go to layout 3. And then take selection for this new. And didn't quite do what I wanted. Then we can try fixture 503 at fixture 501. And we go layout 4. And this sound form, instead of the first sound form, we'd actually change this to sound number 7. So, hard to keep track of all this. So basically, Bitmap 501, just to kind of recap on this, Bitmap 501 is the effect for the bass frequency. So sound 1, right? Sound 1 is the bass frequency. Effect 502 is basically sound 3 or 4. Sound 4, which would be in the middle, which is the mid. Bitmap fixture 503 is sound 7, which is the high notes. So therefore, if I pick Bitmap fixture 501, I call that effect under the video layer. I'm calling image 15 and layout 2. See how it's controlling this one. Then if I do fixture 502, which would be the mids, that's still image 15, but it's layout 3, and it's this effect. It's not mapping itself correctly. And if I do fixture 504, not 504, 503, at full, this effect, image 15 again, layout 4, and we add our clashes back in there and our cowbells. Not working.
You have to scale the images.
Oh, correct. That's a good point. At fixture, I wasn't doing the at copy function at fixture. Yes, you're correct. I had done like some funny image scaling, to which I adjusted this. But to not take up too much time, I hope that was clear. In terms of the process, you have to basically set up your image on one, then you have to make duplicates for each of the layout views, then duplicates for the effects, and then duplicates for the bitmap fixtures. Obviously, if you set this up once, basically if you set up your effects and your bitmap fixtures, there's no limit to the number of bitmap fixtures you patch, so make that part of your start show, your 7 bitmap fixtures, and your effects related to audio. Then all you have to do is rearrange layout views depending on the shows that you're on. Cool?
Cool. All right, we have a couple questions about sound input here. Is it possible to set the BPM from a short sound sample, like just the count in, and keep that speed when turning off the input?
Yeah, the BPM is calculated on the fly. So once it sets itself, it stays there. So for example, if I start this kick drum again, BPM is calculated. I'll try to move this down here. BPM is calculated right now. It's at 240. Bring the sound to 0. That BPM fader just stays there. Software's not reacting. Audio is still being sent in, but since the sound input is at 0, it stays there. Now, if I change this beat, 80. Now the kick drum is slowed down. BPM doesn't change until I bring that sound input in. It's going to take a few hits to recalculate, and now it's recalculated to 80, and you're good to go. So now it's locked in at that new BPM. So I think that clarifies the question. You would sample a little bit and then run your fader up and down. Like I said, that was why I pointed out that you can make this a physical fader. It could be on one of your executors as well. It's just a special master. Under the Grandmaster's sound in. Yeah. So what I manipulate in this sound window is exactly the same as that physical fader. Okay.
Cool. You ready for some non-sound questions?
Yeah, that's all sound questions, and we can move on. That's what we're here for.
Yeah. What are dummy fixtures used for?
Right.
Give me an example of a use of a dummy fixture.
A placeholder, or you want a dummy fixture to control remote inputs. Sometimes dummy fixtures are used just to get visual indication of something. Like you store a dummy fixture into a queue list, and in your layout view, you reference that fixture being on to indicate that your queue list is running. I've seen that one before, because in a layout view, there's no way to have an indicator that an executor is running. But in your first queue, if you store your dummy fixture at 100, as long as that fader is up, you're going to see that fixture in your layout view. And some people go as far as doing dummy fixtures with gobos. Since you could see gobos in the layout view, they do custom images that say on and off. So each his own.
Cool. Is there a way to default the queue color fader one way or the other?
I'm confused. The queue color fader?
Yeah.
What's the
So go to the special dialog, the quality and RGBAW.
Oh. The queue fader. Got it. I was thinking like queue list.
Ah.
Sorry.
No, the queue, the quality.
So what's the question again? Sorry.
Is there a way to default it one way or the other?
No, because that's not a real thing. It's an algorithm. It's reactive to an algorithm based on a reverse calculation of cyan, magenta, yellow, and if you have more colors, it's all a variation. You see there is no queue fader because it's only RGB. On the wrong screen here. If I select one of our 4-color fixtures, you can actually see the Q fader where it's just mixing the primary or the pure. But what's happening in your case is that you're probably calling the fixture at a given set of values, and it's reverse calculating what that Q fader should be. So unfortunately, no way to default it.
Cool. The only other couple inquiries I have, or the rest that are left, are about the webinars. Is it possible to watch this webinar later? This is a very common question that we get. What happens to our webinars, Will?
Yeah, I think I alluded to that multiple times in this webinar. If the recording is successful, it is not successful every time, it's just a matter of technology. But if it's successful, we will post them to our YouTube channel. And you don't have to remember all these various locations because we have a support dashboard, support.aclighting.com, where it takes you to our knowledge base, our YouTube channel, subscribe to our newsletter, and various warranty forms, application forms, etc. And if you don't remember that URL, hopefully you remember aclighting.com. You can go to the support tab, takes you to our dashboard. Okay.
One last question here. Hey, Will, are we going to be doing a webinar when the new release comes out, all about the new features?
Well, let's see. Did we do that last time?
Pretty sure we did.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, we did.
We always do. There's webinar on new features, but there is no release yet. Some people think there was, but there's not. So there we go. 3.2 feature overview. We did a 3.1 feature overview, although that never made it to the
It's not in the Tech Talks playlist, but it is on the website.
And we'll do a 3.3 when it comes out.
Yes. So to recap, yes, we do webinars on the new version and the new features.
Yep.
Oh, hey, there you go. That's all I got, Will.
That's it? Okay, you guys have 15 seconds to send in any other questions. Otherwise, we will get out of your hair for the day. And just so you can finish off with a lovely little beat. This is why I'm not a drummer. All right.
You need more cowbell.
More cowbell.
It had to be said.
All right. Well, Will Murphy signing out. Happy programming.
Happy programming, all.